Our journey begins on the edge of the mighty Pacific Ocean in Malibu, California, famous for great surf and its pristine natural beauty.
What an absolutely beautiful day.
Gorgeous, the sun is shining on us, the waves are crashing, birds are flying.
And the forest, don't forget the forest.
Oh, the forest is stunning.
The forest beneath these waves is a kelp forest. Although kelp behaves like a plant, it's actually a type of algae. Plants have leaves and stems, but kelp has blades and little bladders filled with gas that float to the surface and absorb sunlight. Kelp forests are the biological backbone for marine animals of every shape and size. Even whales love to play in kelp and often rub against it in a practice called kelping. Scientists are racing to not only understand the importance of kelp forests, but also how to save them.
I'm noticing that it seems like different animals in this tank are using different parts of the kelp forest.
Yeah, so with kelp forest, you've got a ton of life. You'll find some that are up at the surface. Some animals use the middle. You'll notice our giant sea bass coming by right now.
Yeah.
A lot of times the middle zone is for predators. And you get a ton of things on the bottom as well. A lot of animals use what's called a holdfast. It's what makes kelp attach to the bottom. And a lot of animals use those both to hide themselves for protection, or they'll actually lay eggs in them.
Interesting. So it's like 3 distinct layers of the kelp. How tall might they grow?
The giant kelp that we have here in Southern California gets up to 200 feet.
I think kelp's amazing. When I dive in a kelp forest, it is like walking through the most beautiful redwood forest ever.
It provides shelter, it provides food. It's such an important part of the ecosystem.
But recently, kelp forests have suffered the most devastating mass die-off event ever recorded.
In the north coast of California, 96% of kelp canopies have been lost. This is something that's happened very quickly in the last few years. Like, that has caught people's attention.
I've seen a lot of change, especially with the kelp in the ocean. It was just a vast collapse. And all of a sudden, all this kelp that we've been enjoying for all these years, it was gone. And then the next year, it didn't come back. And the next year, it didn't come back. If anything, this year especially, it's worse.
Millions of tiny creatures called purple sea urchins are spreading across the ocean floor and devouring kelp forests as they go.
There isn't a mile of coastline that doesn't have purple urchins all over it. They've branched out like ants.
That is the only organism that you're gonna see occupy the seafloor. You're just looking at this scorched earth scenario of spiky purple carpet.
Sea urchins are remarkable creatures. Purple sea urchins can live up to 70 years, and they can even lay dormant for years, waiting for an opportunity to spread.
So in 2014, about 10 years ago, we saw warm waters start hitting the coast of California and the Eastern Pacific. Huge warm water events that encapsulated the coastline. Warm water changed the way that a lot of organisms behave, survive, grow, and thrive.
The warmer water was devastating to a critically important predator of sea urchins, the sunflower sea star.
Sunflower stars can be like this big or even bigger. And in fact, they're one of the largest sea stars in the world. It's completely valid to compare them to the other top predators that we talk about a lot. Sharks, a wolf, a lion. They're very similar in the sense that they can have really extreme effects on entire ecosystems.
The rising temperature started a chain reaction called sea star wasting disease that killed over 90% of all sea star species.
The effect that it has is actually kind of horrible. The body becomes all twisted and deflated, and they could lose arms, they could get wounds, and eventually they kind of just dissolve into a puddle of goo and die. It's really quite terrible to see.
Just touching it, it turned into mush. It just melted and rotted into the rocks.
They've basically all but disappeared. There's just been very, very few sightings of them at all in the last several years. And the thing that sunflower stars eat are sea urchins.
We saw native purple sea urchin change their behavior. Now that their predator was gone, they moved out of their cracks and crevices and moved into the nearshore environment. And they pretty much ate the rest of the kelp along a 350-kilometer stretch of coastline here in California.
To see the scope of the problem for myself, I traveled to Fort Bragg, California with biologist Kristen McHugh.
So what's happening right out here in the kelp forest?
So what we're seeing right now is a bull kelp canopy. So that is a nursery habitat for fish and invertebrates and birds. But this is one of the persistent patches of kelp that we think that urchin are moving into.
So it's really in distress. It's having some real problems.
That's my suspicion right now, and I'd like to go verify that suspicion.
Well, let's go take a look.
Yeah, let's go check it out.
Coming up,